Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm John Chandler, and welcome to the channel. I'm with Tapscott Media Services, and I just thought I'd share with you how I produce music. Simply put, I have a young artist that I'm developing, and so she wanted me to make a new track for her. And one of the ways that I do this is her particular genre. She's into R&B and hip hop. So I have the excuse me, I have the MPC Live. And typically I use the MPC Live as like a sketch pad. And so I basically create the outline of the song, and I make all the individual sequences, and then I sew them together into a song, and then I re-export that as a sequence, and then I explode the tracks, and then I take all those tracks and I put them into my digital audio workstation, which for me is Logic. I'll probably make a video about how that whole process goes, but right now I've already done that. And so all the tracks are currently already in Logic. So I'm basically just starting the process from Logic on forward. So sit back and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. And hey, if you like the video, hit the like and subscribe. All right, let's get started. Okay, so first things first is I like to get organized, and what I've done is I take all the tracks that come in, and as you can see here, each one of the tracks in Logic, they come with icons, and typically when you bring it in from any other, because these are basically just stems that come from the MPC. And when you bring it in, the icons are just generic. The software tries to figure out what it is, but 9 out of 10, it's just a bunch of drum sets and it's all the same icon. So first things first is I go through each one and I listen to what the track is. And I basically, I create a cycle region and I hit play and I solo each track. And so this is the bass drum. And then I go on to the next one. And obviously, as you can see here, there is no content here. So I slide over to here and listen. That also is a bass drum. It has a lot of reverb on it, and I chose to put reverb on it. There are no effects on any of these audio files. These are how they came out of the MPC. And I'd have to say, that the tracks that come out of the MPC, they're very clean, and the sound design work and the sampling on it is very good. And I really don't have to do much to it here within Logic. I really might add a little bit of compression, basically just for mixing, basically making sure that everything kind of blends together. But as far as adding real hard effects or corrective EQs, I really don't have to do that coming out of the MPC. So Akai, y'all really did a bang up job there. No surprises though. I'm an old head, so I remember the MPC 60s and the 1000s and all that stuff from back in the 90s and stuff. So this is really nice that they really improved upon that. But yeah, so let's get back into it. Yeah, so here you can see this second track. It's also a bass drum. And so what I will do is I will rename each one of these tracks. And so I named this BD for bass drum 1, BD2 for bass drum 2, and I put verb on it. So when I look at it, I go, okay, well, I know that that's reverb. And it's real important that you go through and do all these to every single one of the tracks, because as you can see here, there are 19 tracks. And as you're mixing, if you hear a problem, you need to be able to visually see what you're working with real fast to be able to get to it, instead of constantly scrolling and soloing and figuring out what's what. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a particular track that's not listed here, and that is the master track. So what you do in Logic is you hit the X, and that brings up your mixer. And as you can see, you got your master and you got your stereo output. So the stereo output basically takes all the inputs from these source faders and brings them into this one stereo output. And on the stereo output, I currently have the Arc software. I digress. So Arc software, Arc stands for auto room correction. And we all know that, we got our studios in our bedrooms, and the rooms themselves are not acoustically treated, or are not a good, it's not a good acoustical environment. Basically, you want to make sure that what you're hearing in the room, meaning what you're hearing coming off the speakers, is actually what's on the audio file. And a lot of times when you hear stuff coming out of your speakers, you got reflections. You have some frequencies that bounce into each other and they collapse. You got some frequencies that bounce and they amplify. And you might be adjusting your EQs based on what you're hearing. But in reality, what you're hearing is the confusion of the sound because of the physical room confinement, because of the physical attributes of the room that you're in. So I purchased this software, Arc, and it's by IK Multimedia. And the software allows you to, you take multiple measurements using a microphone, and it basically makes a compensation EQ curve that makes sure that anything that it really isn't supposed to be loud is pulled down as far as certain frequencies. As far as phasing, it takes care of that. As far as stereo imaging and tap delays, all that stuff. And maybe I'll do a video on that too. But basically, I have that auto room correction on the master bus. But because I'm mixing in my headphones right now, I don't have the room to worry about. So I need to turn that off, because if I leave that on, that EQ is what I'm hearing, and it's going to sound weird. So here, I'll play it for you. So here, I'll play. That's what it sounds like with the auto room correction EQ on, and then I'll turn it off. You see how it's louder? A lot more mid-range. And there's no attack on it, because my room has problems with those particular frequencies. And so because I'm not using my speakers right now, I don't want to hear that. So I'll turn that off. Anyway, so back to the matter at hand. So as I said before, as you see here, there is no master, there's no stereo out and no master fader on here. And I want to be able to see that. So I will select that particular channel and the master, and I will right click and I will hit create track. And when you do that, basically when you hit X, now you have that. So you have your master and your stereo out. Okay. And I'm going to put the hold on a second. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah. All right. So also, just want to let you know that I know you probably heard some noises or whatever. And basically, I have a controller. I use the soft tube. I use the Console 1 by Softube, and it's basically a fader bank. And I also have the Console 1, which is basically a channel strip. So every fader that I have, I just touch it, and I have access to the various parameters on this channel strip, which is EQ, compression, high pass, low pass filtering, panning, things of that nature. Enough of that, but you don't have to have the controller in order to do what I'm doing here. I'm just sharing with you how I do the mixing and organization when I finally get the sims from my MPC into my DAW software, which is Logic Pro. All right, back at it. All right, so as you see here, yep, that's bass drum, and then I'll select the next one. And here it's the snare. And I have three particular snares that happen at various times. Let's see, we got this one. See, they're happening at different times right here. Yeah. So also, if you notice, there are no loops on here. This is all me actually playing the pads. I played everything. As an instrumentalist, I can do loops and everything and sampling and stuff, but I just find it more fun if I play all the parts, and so I really enjoy that. We got a third snare. No beat is complete without the hi-hats. And so I just go through and I organize, continue to organize. Here I got the hand clap. See the nice generic icon. So yeah, enough of that. But basically that's what I do for all my tracks. I go through and I make sure that it has the correct icon, and I verify that the sounds that they're supposed to be are annotated correctly. Now, if you notice, like a lot of the instruments, there's A, B, C, and D. When you export from the MPC, it breaks out all the sounds individually. When it breaks out the sounds individually, it's actually breaking out the sounds of each pad individually. So if on the MPC, you can have a single sound on a pad, but if you go to 16 levels, you can play that sound and it goes up in half steps as far as pitch. It goes up chromatically, so you can play it like a piano. So you might have a doo on one pad, but if you hit the 16 levels, it'll go doo 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 doo. I'm not a singer at all, but I'll at least show you on the machine here. You can see, you might have a single sound here, and it'll only play that one sound. But if you hit on the MPC, also on the machine, but on the MPC, if you hit 16 levels, there's 16 pads here, so that one sound goes up in pitch. So when you send out and export all your stems, it's going to send out all the sounds for this pad, all the sounds for this pad, all the sounds for this pad. And if the sounds are the same, meaning they're coming from the same source, they're just different pitches, what you get is you get this. You get a synth lead that's spread out over five different tracks, because I played 5 different pads with the same sound but different pitches. So here, I'll play them and you can hear it. And as you can see, they're playing at different times. So that's why you get multiple tracks of the same sound. So basically, once you set any parameters on one track, you can copy those parameters on the other tracks of the same sound, and you're good to go. And as you can hear, it's only one single pitch. But because I played it across multiple pads on the MPC, if I unmute the other pads or the other tracks of the same sound. See? So it's pretty self-explanatory. So you want to go through, verify the sounds, then you want to name all your tracks, stay organized. You also want to put an icon on here so you can visually tell what it is. And you also want to arrange the sounds logically. So I typically put my drums up first. And drums are normally layered bass, snare, hi-hat, and then percussions follow. So I have my bass, snare, hi-hat. That's what you consider a trap set. That's your minimum drum set. Then you have your percussions. In this case, only percussion I have is a clap sound. Now, vocals are normally last, but this is more of a vocal effect. It's just someone shouting. So I put that as a percussion effect. Then I have my melodic instruments. And in this case, I started out with my lead synthesizers, then my orchestral stabs, and then bass. Now, I also like to have my basses right after my drums. So drums and bass. In my case, I don't have a bass guitar. I have a synthesized bass. So I want these bass tracks to be next to my drums. So I'm going to take these, I highlight them, and then I'm going to slide them up right after the claps, right there. So see, I have my rhythm section. I have my bass, snare, hi-hat, and percussion, and then bass. So from here all the way back to track one. From track one all the way to, from track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's your drums. Then you have your bass. Sections. So I make sure that I put the bass right after the drums. Okay. All right. So now that that's done, now that everything is organized, actually I'm going to put this in full screen so you can see it better. But now that that's organized, I can now start the mixing process. So I know it's not exciting and glamorous or whatever, but being organized really sets the bar for your clients. If you're organized and you go through a lot of work, which we all do, and a client says, hey, you know what? Let's say they're sitting behind you while you're mixing, or they're doing an overdub, and they say, hey, that cowbell is too loud. If you're not organized like this and you have like 100 tracks, finding that cowbell, you're going to be fumbling, and your client's going to lose confidence in you. And you don't want that. And you're going to get frustrated. So that's going to get into your head and mess your future mix up for that particular session. So taking the time to get organized up front really is an investment in yourself and an investment in your craft as a producer. So that's really important. All right. So here's the first couple of measures of the track. Okay. Now, when I made this on the MPC, I had different sections. And these sections are called sequences. But now that everything is inside of the DAW, you now have sections of the song. And so you can create, you can use this within Logic. You can create on the arrangement tab, you can create little markers that says intro. So I can go like this, drag this all the way to here. And Logic, it has within the software, it already knows the typical song structures. Intro, verse, hook, chorus, verse, hook, bridge, vamp. Things like that. So this way, when the client, again, when the client is in the vocal booth or doing an overdub and they say, hey, go to the intro. If your song is really long and you're somewhere way over here and you go, okay, where's the intro? No, you can use this arrangement tab or arrangement marquee and you can find that. You can also use different colors and things like that, but I'm just going to do that. So this is the intro. All right, I don't need to see the signature. I don't need the tempo. And I don't need any markers right now. Okay. So I'm going to start with just the intro. And as you can see, I am really way too loud. I am over 3 decibels over peak, and that's not good. But to be honest, in the digital realm, there's more headroom than you think it is, because if you're doing dB full scale versus 0 dB, you have some leeway in there. But this is red, and we all know universally red is not good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solo the drums right now. All right, so those are my drums, and I'm going to pull them down, and I'm just going to keep it on loop, and I'm going to bring each one up. So what I do is on the stereo output, I come up here and I select a setting, and I use Legacy, Logic, Mastering, and Broadcast Ready. Now they have all sorts of presets here, like Final Ballad Master if you want a wide sound for a ballad, pumping the bass, hip hop stuff. But Broadcast Ready has always worked well for me, and I like to focus on making sure that things are radio friendly or broadcast friendly. That meaning that making sure that the bass isn't too heavy and making sure that the highs aren't too high as well, making sure everything is kind of even keeled. And so when you select this, Logic has various plugins. They have an EQ. Let's look at the EQ. And it brings up brings up some mid-range, and it brings up a little bit of the highs, plus 8 dB at 20K, and just a little bump at about 45K, And then you have a multiplexer, which is a multi-band compressor. Basically, you can select a group of frequencies across the spectrum from 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz, and you can place 4 compressors onto 4 groups of frequencies, and you can choose the range of frequencies. You can slide these left and right, and you can adjust when the compression comes in. You can adjust how hard the compression reacts, how fast it reacts, how long it stays. Attack, decay, sustain, and release. But these particular settings are a generic, solid setting for Final Dance, meaning it's going to have some bass in it, and it's going to have some highs, and that kind of follows the EQ, some highs and the bass. Okay, and when you pump those particular bands up, You want to make sure you don't overpump it, so they put compressors on it to make sure you don't go beyond. It's not too much. Then you have what's called an exciter. And what happens is you can take, so every frequency, has a primary frequency, and to the left and right, there are other frequencies that are stimulated by that single frequency. Those other frequencies are called harmonics. So when you play a single pitch, that is a phenomenon that occurs so many times per second. And like we learn in math, is that if it occurs a particular number of times per second, and that is a multiple of another frequency, that stimulates that frequency. Okay? So those other frequencies get affected and they start to sound. They get excited and they produce sound. And those harmonics, along with that primary frequency, is what makes what they call timbre. That is how we are able to recognize what a flute sounds like, or what a particular person's voice sounds like, or what a particular instrument sounds like, because these other harmonics get stimulated along with the primary frequency. And we learn that as humans. We learn that. So what an exciter does is an exciter stimulates those other frequencies at a certain rate, at a certain amount. So it kind of, in layman's terms, it makes the sound more rich. Instead of being thin and tinny, it makes it more rich and robust. So that's what the exciter does. It excites the other frequencies. Okay. All right. And obviously then you have a adaptive limiter. Now, an adaptive limiter it basically reads the energy coming into the plug-in, and it makes sure that the output doesn't exceed what you place here on this parameter. And this look ahead is how fast it can look before it outputs in order to anticipate how it's going to process it. Then once it's processed, you can boost the gain of the processed signal. Okay, so basically, in layman's terms, the adaptive limiter allows you to increase the volume with the safety of not exceeding the overall decibel levels to go into the red. So it protects you from distortion, but it increases volume. So it's a safe way of increasing volume. So this particular broadcast ready setting has these particular plugins that allow the signal, that allows the music to be able to be as robust and as prepared in order to meet the professional standards of broadcasting. And in our case, it broadcasts over the internet. I guess there's still radio stations out there, but anyway, that's what happens. So I've brought down all the volumes of the drums. We're working on the drums first. So I'm going to go ahead and mix, starting with the bass drum. Now, when I mix, there's going to be one particular, I'm sorry to keep, man, so many things fly through my head, and I'm just trying to be as helpful as possible without being as boring and dry as possible. So going back to gain staging, going back to making sure your levels are proper. Volume is accumulative, meaning certain frequencies, like low frequencies, are larger than high frequencies. So if you have a lot of low frequency energy, then that means that the volume is going to go up. So when you start bringing in your tracks when you're mixing, you need to kind of anticipate when your last track is also brought in. So what I normally do is I pick particular elements of the music and I say, these are the priority sounds that have to be heard. And of those priority sounds, which ones have the most energy that I have to be careful of? And of those sounds, that's that's the mark, or that's the point that I bring the volume up to. So in my case, I typically want to make sure that vocals are heard well and the bass drum hits solid and hard. So for me, it's bass drum and vocals for this particular genre. So that being said, is that I need to set the volume based on this loudest element, which is going to be these two bass drums. So I'm probably going to set the two bass drums to cumulatively probably be around maybe minus 12 to 15 dB. And then you might say, wow, that's real low. That's real low. But as I add more elements, the overall volume is going to come up. So as you can see, I'm at about minus 11 dB. And that's peak. Peak meaning the transient volume, that one instance at the peak of the sound is that. This is almost like an average. But so the bass drum is going to be primary. So I have to make sure that that is going to be heard. So see, and I'm already at minus 5. So that means I only have 5 dB to add before I'm in the red. And I've got a lot more elements to add. So that's way too hot. That's way too hot. So you can either bring it down. You can either bring it down or you can add compression. Now, I don't like the risk of adding compression is this. Compression actually distorts the sound. I don't mean distorts as far as it makes it sound distorted like an electrical guitar, but it changes the sound from its original form. And I already like the way this bass drum sounds. If you put compression on it, you might accidentally soften it. And when Akai made the sounds, this particular sound, it already had compression on it. It already did all of its sound design. It already did its mix. The engineers already did their work for it. They made it sound as good as possible. So I don't want to double that. I don't want to add more to it as far as compression, because then it will sound squashed. And I needed to punch through. Remember, I want the bass drums and the vocals to punch through. So if I add compression and it becomes soft, then I'll get down to the last track and wonder how come my beats aren't banging. You know, it's because you squashed them. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring it down in volume. All right, the next sound that is available, and the bass drums typically are in the center of the stereo field. So the next sound that's available is going to be my snares. Now, typically I place my snares at the same volume as the vocals because the snares create, they bring that crispiness to the track. So it should sit just above the bass drum. And you might be saying to yourself now, wow, it's so quiet, I can't hear anything. I've learned that when I mix at low volumes, it forces me to focus my ear to hearing the detail better. Because a lot of times you'll mix at loud volumes and then the mix sounds terrible when you play it in a car or you play it at a club. So listening to it critically at low volumes has always done better for me. Now this snare has reverb on it, so I don't need to pan it or anything. Okay, I'm gonna talk about panning. When it comes to drums and you pan, you can either pan from the perspective of the audience or from the perspective of the drummer. Meaning, if you're playing drums and you're sitting on the drum throne and you're looking at the audience and you're playing like a normal right-hand drummer, where's your hi-hat? It's on the left side. Your snare, it's a little bit to the left. Your ride cymbal, to the right. Your crash, to the left. Your toms go left to right. And your floor tom is on the right. That's from the drummer's perspective. Now, if you were to mix from the audience perspective and you're looking at the performer, looking at the drummer, the hi-hat is on the right. The crash cymbal's on the right. The snare is a little bit to the right. The ride cymbal's to the left. Floor tom to the left. Toms go from right to left. That makes a big difference if you're recording, especially if you're recording live musicians or a live performance. And originally recordings were basically for the general public who couldn't afford to go to the concerts. So the engineer, his or her main job was basically to make sure that the performance is as true to as if you were there, so that the person listening to that record can close their eyes and go, wow, I can hear the guitarist. He's stage left. The drummer's in the center of the stage. Wow, the bass player's stage right. Wow, okay, so, you got the DJ over here. It's basically a reproduction of the performance. So that's where panning becomes critical. So as the mix engineer and as the producer, you have to ask yourself, do I want this to be from the audience perspective, which is typically used when it's a live performance or the recording is of a live band? Or do you want it from the perspective of the musician or stage perspective? For this case, because it's not a live performance, I'm going to choose from but I'm a musician. I'm going to choose the audience perspective. Now, this particular snare, because it has reverb on it, the reverb already washes across both of the speakers. And right now, the dry snare, the dry part of the sound is in the center between the two speakers. So I'm going to pan it a little bit to the right. Panning is also important because it makes space for the primary sounds. And as I said before, for me, the primary sound on this track is going to be the bass drum and the vocals. So it'll be good to pan things out of the way so that when that vocal comes in, when it's recorded, it has space within the spectrum and within the stereo field to be heard and not fighting for space. So I'm panning the snare a little bit to the right. Next snare. Now this snare is basically doing the same thing, but it's what I call an accent snare. See, if I mute the first one, see, the second one doesn't have any reverb on it. So therefore it's very articulate. Therefore it comes through, it cuts through. It's very specific, defining. The other snare is pretty because it has reverb on it. So I use the balance of the two. So this dry snare though, I'm going to keep in the center because it helps keep the tempo of the song and it doesn't have reverb on it. But I need to bring it down. As you can see, I'm playing with the pan. Actually, I might pan a little bit left. That way the snares are wide and out of the way of the center where the vocalist is going to be. Now it's very important to hit save every now and then. All right, the next sound is the hi-hats. As you can tell, it's within the MPC, it's pan left, even though it shows that it's center here. As you can see, it's left heavy. But hi-hats from the audience perspective are typically on the right. So I have to compensate paying this one real hard to the right. All right, so now let's look at where I'm sitting in volume. Right now I'm sitting at -13, so I have plenty of headroom before I distort. So if I do my entire mix and I don't go above -15, that's fine, because remember, after you mix it down to stereo, you have to master it. And when you master it, that's when you can add that volume. So you want to leave some space here because there's going to be a lot more work after this process, because mixing it isn't the final step. You mix it and then you master it. So you have to be very cognizant of that. So it takes a wise steward and a disciplined steward to do that mix. All right, I'm going to bring up the bass drums just a little bit. Here we go. Now what I'll do is, if I want to hear at a higher volume, I will turn up the monitors in the room. So I'm going to turn up the feed to the headphones. And then I bring it back down. Okay, now I'm going to work on these claps. typically I want these, because the claps are almost like in the same frequency as the snare, I want them at the same volume. But in this case, as you can see, this particular snare right here dropped out. And so this is taking its place. This is taking its place because there's no real snare. There's a light snare here. So I want this to match that. So I'll bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to pan this one left. And you'll be surprised when you pan something. You'll be surprised when you pan something. Let's say you had everything in the center. Everything's fighting for space. But when you pan something, it has its own space to work with. So you're going to find that that particular sound comes forward in the mix because it's not fighting for space. You know, one of the main jobs of an engineer is to carve out space. I don't know if you ever heard that before, but it's called carving out space, and that's what you do. And it's not just volume and position, it's also frequency. So what you'll do is you'll say, okay, well, for frequency ranges 50 to 100 hertz, only these instruments will have that. Everything else will have those frequencies rolled off. So that means that the bass is only coming from those particular instruments, and the other instruments don't have to fight for it. But if the other instruments also have 50 to 100 hertz, they're fighting for it, and it starts to get what they call muddy. So carving out space is not only volume, but it's position and it's frequency. All right. All right. Now see here, the second bass drum comes in. So I'm going to bring that in. So this first bass drum has the articulation. The second bass drum has the sub frequencies and a lot of reverb on it. So it's large. And this is a different part of the song, so I want this part of the song to stand out. So basically this bass drum gives direction, while this one gives feel. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I know it was long in the tooth. It's a long video and everything, but hey, things like this, they're not quick and they're not, you know, quick and fast. But basically that's my drum section. The next video, I'll start bringing in the bass so that the bass and the drums, which is the what? The rhythm section, will mix the bass and the drums together to form the rhythm section. Once again, I am John Chandler with Tapscott Media Services. Thank you for tagging along. God bless.